Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Ghost and Ghouls. My name is Arbuckle, and welcome to the spookiest radio show around, bringing you the creepiest tales to keep you up at night. If you enjoy my show, give the bell a click to be notified when I go on air. Every other Sunday we are live. Now for this evening, we have a very special guest joining us for tonight's show. Without further ado, let's welcome my friend Silver Threads.
Hello, Fetch. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here this evening.
It's an absolute honor to have you here, friend. Now before we get into the show, please do tell us about yourself and what you do.
Well, I like to read horror stories on my channel. I narrate longer stories and have a series called Bite-Sized Horror that I dedicate to the two-sentence horror stories. I'm also a spider living inside a human host, but that doesn't usually come up. Occasionally I like to switch bodies, but this one's very comfortable, so I may be here for a while, and the humans around here, quite frankly, are delicious.
Well, now my new neighbor might be a little loud today, so my apologies in advance.
No worries. So, on my way here, did you ever notice how gloomy it is over here on this part of town?
I have no idea what you're talking about. It's perfectly sunny out.
Seriously though, it's like really cloudy out.
I said, it's perfectly sunny out. Now folks, it's time to dive into tonight's stories. So with that being said, turn off the lights, get comfortable, grab a snack, grab your loved ones or whoever, cause now it's time to dive into tonight's stories. So enough of my talking. Take it away, Silver Threads.
I was in Boy Scouts when I was a kid, and it was one of the high points of my life. I made hundreds of memories hanging around my friends and going to scout camps. However, there was this one camp out that has made me scared of the supernatural and has haunted me ever since. At first, when we got to the scout camp, I was so excited to see that they had a lake with all sorts of boats such as kayaks and canoes. But the scoutmaster said we couldn't go into the water until the camp was all set up, and everyone had to turn in their physicals to the scout first aid director. My friends and I quickly turned in our physicals and put up our tent as fast as we could. It was sloppy looking, but hey, we were teenagers at the time. We walked over to the dock and wrote down on a clipboard that we are taking a canoe and a kayak. Charlie wanted to use the kayak because, in his words, it made him feel fast. Charlie was a little overweight and always wanted to go fast, so he took every chance he got. Jim and I took the canoe out together because Jim was younger than Charlie and I and still didn't know how to swim. So I took him under my wing and treated him like a younger brother. We paddled out to where a stick was pointing out of the water. Charlie grabbed the top of it and tried to pull it out, but it didn't budge, so he soon gave up on it. We continued to mess around it. "Guys, check this out," Charlie said as he paddled as fast as he could in the kayak and tried to whirl around on a dime. "Oh crap!" he screamed as the whole kayak capsized and he splashed into the water. Jim and I started laughing our heads off, and I said with tears in my eyes, Hey Jim, who am I?" "Oh guys, check this out," I said mockingly. Charlie was laughing along with us and responded while swimming over to our canoe. "If you think it's so funny, why don't you guys come join me?" He then grabbed the side of the boat and tried to tip us. "Stop it, Charlie! Don't do it!" Jim said in a terrified voice while holding onto the sides of the canoe like a cat. Charlie didn't listen and jumped up on the side of the canoe, and it, like the kayak, toppled over. The water was cold, but it wasn't terrible. However, Jim was freaking out, trying to tip the canoe right side up. One of the camp staff was on the dock and heard Jim's cries, and she suddenly got into a canoe and began to paddle towards us. Before she got to us, Charlie started splashing around. "What's wrong with you?" I asked as I held onto the canoe. "Something brushed up next to my leg and it feels like my leg is on fire," Charlie said as he treaded water trying to keep his head afloat. "That's strange," I said as I became scared of what could be lurking under us. The camp staff pulled up beside us and helped Jim into her canoe. She then helped us turn our canoe right side up, and Charlie was able to get back into his kayak. While she helped us, the camp staff said, "You know, you guys should have waited before coming out here unsupervised by an adult. Also, you guys don't have life jackets on, and that's really stupid, especially for the kid who can't swim." After hearing this, Jim looked down and his cheeks turned a bright red. "You know, We were just excited to play on the lake, I said while fiddling with the canoe paddle's handle. Well, you can do plenty of that later, but for now, you all should head out to the fire pit. They're greeting all the new campers there and also are telling some local urban legends, the camp staff said as she led us back to the dock. So after we put the canoe and kayak away, we began to get dressed. But as we were changing, Charlie comes up to me and says while holding up his pants leg, "What does this look like to you?" I examined his leg and it was not good, and responded saying, "Well, that's awfully strange looking, Charlie. It looks like someone who was missing a finger branded you with their handprint. It looks burned into your skin." "That's the same thing I thought it looked like too. I got it from whatever brushed up against my leg in the lake, and it itches real bad," Charlie said as he tried to keep himself from scratching. "I'm glad whatever touched you didn't touch me, because that sucker looks like it hurts," Jim said from across the tent. The scoutmaster overheard our discussion and said interruptingly outside of our tent, "Boys, you all better hurry up and make it down to the fire pit on time with the rest of the troop, or we won't be in the running to receive the spirit stick at the end of the week. I'm heading down there right now, so don't be too far behind me." "Yes, sir," we all replied, and as the scoutmaster walked off, I said, "Who even wants that spirit stick anyway? It's just a stick with junk on it from other troops." "Scoutmasters like to have something to brag about on their troop when they meet other scoutmasters," Charlie said with a chuckle. "We best be on our way," Jim said as he unzipped the tent and crawled out. We followed behind him and all walked speedily down through the fire pit. That's where we saw the rest of our troop on the front log closest to the fire. I then thought to myself annoyed, "Of course Jake, our patrol leader, would choose the front log out of all the other logs to sit on. That idiot always has to be in the spotlight, doesn't he? He's nothing more than a stuck-up rich mommy's boy." Before we were able to sit down with the rest of our troop, Jake walked up to the three of us and says, "You're all late. I want our troop to look good so we can win that spirit stick at the end of the week, and you imbeciles aren't going to mess it up for me." The scoutmaster then chimed in, "Now, son, that's no way to talk to your fellow scouts. Apologize to them right this instant." "Dad, stay out of this. I'm teaching these slackers a lesson on what it means to be in my troop," Jake said, looking at his dad, who then, like a dog with its tail in between its legs, backed off. It was sort of awkward because all of the other troops were behind us sitting on logs and probably hear the conversation. "Don't get your panties in a bunch. You're not our mom, so get off our backs," I said, sternly annoyed at Jake, who stood in front of where we were trying to sit down. "I'm the patrol leader here, so yeah, I'm your mom while we were at camp," he said in a whiny tone. "You were only voted patrol leader because no one else wanted to be it, and your dad is the scoutmaster," I said as I walked past him and sat down on the log with Jim and Charlie. Jake looked at us and he noticed all of the people that sat behind us looking back at him, and he got embarrassed and sat down, but not before he gave us a dirty look. Soon, all of the camp staff gathered on the other side of the fire pit and welcomed us to the camp. The staff were then introduced, and all of them seemed pretty young except for the camp director and the head cook. The head cook looked like he had been working here for ages and had grayish hair and a thick, bushy mustache. I also noticed that he was missing the ring finger on his right hand. I leaned over to Charlie and said jokingly, "Look, he's missing a ring finger just like the handprint on your leg. Maybe he's the one. You know, the one who put on a scuba diving suit on and tried to get handsy with you in the lake." Jim chuckled, but Charlie replied unamused, "It's not funny, Nick. This thing stings pretty badly." "If it hurts that much, you should get it checked out by the camp doctor," Jim chimed in. "Yeah, I'll see if it gets better tonight, but if not, I'll see what they think it is," Charlie said as he gently placed his hand over the burn mark on his leg. "Shh! You guys need to shut up and pay attention," Jake whispered harshly at us. I stuck my tongue at him and made a goofy face, and Jim saw what I was doing and joined me. "Ugh, you guys are so immature," Jake stated while shaking his head. It was around this time that the camp director said, "Alright, before we let you guys go settle in bed tonight, we're going to have Reggie here tell you a local urban legend." The director then backed up while letting the camp cook come to the front. Of course that hairy man's name is Reggie. It fits him so perfectly, I muttered jokingly to my friends. We laughed, and the man began to talk in a scratchy but somewhat surprisingly smooth voice, saying, "The story I'm about to tell you was told to me by someone who had great-grandparents that grew up in a town not so far from here. The place was an old mining town, but as soon as the mines were shut down, everyone moved away, so now it's abandoned. Anyway, the story originates far before the mines ever were opened, back when the Native Americans roamed this land freely. The story goes that in a tribe there was a man and a woman who loved each other more than the moon loved the stars, as it was said. However, there was another man in the tribe who was envious of them, and he wanted to be with that woman. So he devised a plan, and he killed the man by pushing him off of a cliff into a lake while on a hunting expedition." Reggie paused briefly to try and add emphasis to his words. "Well, when the woman found out about his death, she was in a state of immense mourning and vowed to never take another lover. When the man found out about this, he grew enraged because no matter what he tried, she would not love him. So the only way he thought he could be saved from the guilt that he felt every time he saw her mourning face was to put her out of her misery. So, in the dark of the night, he kidnapped her and took her to a lake. He paddled a canoe out to the middle and threw her body into the water. She, however, fought back and tried to grab onto the side of the canoe. The man took out his knife and stabbed at her hands so she would let go. While he did this, he cut off her ring finger, and she fell off into the water and drowned. The man left not knowing that the finger was still inside the boat, and it's how his tribe found out that he had killed her. Now it is said that she haunts the lake, mourning for her lover to save her, and looking for her lost ring finger." Reggie stopped and looked at all of us, and his face lost all expression, and he said, "Never go to the far end of the lake, and I'm not joking with any of you about this. This could mean the difference between life and death. I say it again, do not go to the far end of the lake. I marked it with a stick poking out of the water, which I anchored to the lake's floor so you guys know where not to go. The story goes that if you disturb where her body rests, she will mark you. That marking is of her hand with the missing middle finger, and if you do not appease her spirit, she will come after you in 4 days since you were marked, and drag you to the bottom of the lake during the night." No one said anything, and there was a deadly silence, and nothing but the crackling of the fire made a sound. After hearing this, Jim and I looked at Charlie, who was stiller than a statue. My blood ran cold, thinking about the elephant in the room. Jim then broke the silence as he mumbled, "Wasn't there a stick where we played in the lake today?" Charlie looked at us trembling and said, Yeah. I tried to pull it out, if you guys remember. This is really scary, and I'm not even joking around here." I then tried to cheer Charlie up by saying, "This is probably just a prank. He's trying to play on us." "If it is, he went overboard by burning this handprint into my leg," Charlie said as he gazed at the red mark. The camp director then took over again and wished everyone a fun camp experience, and they sent us off to our campsites. We soon went to bed, and as we were falling asleep, I whispered to Charlie, "Reggie did say that she would take you to the bottom of the lake if you did not appease her. Maybe there's a way to appease her somehow." "Hopefully," Charlie said worryingly. We then all hunkered down for the night, and none of us slept very well. We woke up early the next morning to go and see if Reggie could tell us any more about how to get rid of the mark on Charlie's leg. As we walked over there, Charlie said to us after examining his leg,
"Hey guys, one of the fingers have disappeared. It's not marked on my leg anymore."
"Well, that's a good sign. Maybe Reggie will help you be able to get the whole thing off," I said as we walked along. So we got to a small, creaky cabin, and Jim knocked on the door, and we all heard a grumbly voice say,
"Who's there?"
come from within. "We need help, sir. We got a problem," I responded back.
Reggie replied, somewhat annoyed, "Take it up with the camp director. It's not my job to deal with your problems." "It's pretty serious, sir,"
Charlie chimed in as he rolled up his pants leg. Reggie opened the door and looked at us through the screen and said,
"Now what's so serious enough that a cook needs to get..."
He stopped as he noticed the mark on Charlie's leg.
"When did you get that?"
he asked intensely as he ushered us into the dingy cabin.
"Yesterday afternoon, right before we went to the campfire pit. We were just playing out in the lake,"
Charlie said very concerningly. "Next to the stick poking out of the water I warned you all to stay away from?" Reggie asked as he looked through some old drawers.
"Yeah, but it was before we knew about your warning,"
Charlie responded with his hands deep in his pockets. Reggie pulled an old wrinkly piece of paper out of the drawer on the shelf and handed it to Charlie, saying,
"There's only one way to appease her, but you have to have the guts to go through with it."
"How do you know so much about her?" I asked as Charlie grabbed the piece of paper from him. Reggie lifted his hand up, and he was missing a ring finger as we had noticed earlier at the campfire, and he said, "Because I was in the same case as he is. The only way to save your life is to cut off your ring finger, then sail a boat to where she supposedly lies, and say that poem that I just gave you word for word. And then you drop your finger into the water, and whatever you do not look down as it sinks. Just paddle back to the dock calmly. If she accepts your offering, the mark on your leg will disappear completely. Also, let me see that mark quickly." Charlie got closer to him, propped up his leg on a wooden chair. Reggie examined it and said, "Okay, remember when I said you had 4 days until she comes and gets you?"
"Yeah,"
Charlie responded questioningly. "Well, you have 3 days left now because one of the fingers has already faded off. When all of them disappear is when she comes for you," Reggie said as he looked Charlie straight in the eyes. "What if we just drive far away from here?" I asked, wondering if there was any other way so Charlie wouldn't have to cut off his finger. "No, it doesn't work. She'll search the entire world until she finds someone who bears her mark," Reggie said as he led us out of his cabin. "Look, I'm sorry for you, but there's no other way to make this right than to follow the steps I've shown you. Now, if you don't mind, I have to go help make breakfast." He then locked the cabin door and left us on the porch as he speedily headed to the dining hall.
"I can't cut off my own finger. I don't have the strength to do that,"
Charlie mumbled to himself with his head drooping down. "You know what? That Reggie guy is probably crazy for all we know. Let's just ignore it, and if she comes down to get you, Jim and I will be there to beat her up," I said with a half-hearted chuckle, knowing that this did not look good.
"You're right, Nick. If I only have 4 days left, then it's great to be spending them with you guys,"
Charlie stated happily, trying to hold back the fear hiding inside of him. "That's the spirit now, Charlie. Let's go eat breakfast and then complete some more merit badge requirements. That'll keep your mind off of it," I said as we walked into the dining hall. So we went up to our different marriage badge stations throughout the day until we all met up for dinner at the dining hall, and Jake was there walking around showing everyone in our troop that he had played near the stick that we were supposed to avoid and that he got marked by the girl. He soon came over to us, and though he didn't like us that much, he never gave up an opportunity to gloat. So he came up and said, "Hey guys, look, I got marked by that girl, and I'm not even scared. I bet this whole so-called urban legend is fake." The three of us looked at the mark that he had on his arm, but it was not the same as Charlie's. It was like the discount version of it. I just replied, "Cool," trying not to get into a fight with him or to prolong the conversation. Jake then walked off all proudly, acting like he got our respect. "So what, did he just put makeup on to make it look like he got marked?" I asked Charlie and Jim. "I guess so. He probably got it from his mom," Jim replied while laughing. However, Charlie did not seem amused. All this had done was remind him of his dark fate if he did not offer up his ring finger. We finished eating, and the next day another finger imprint disappeared. And the same thing with the day that followed, until it was the last day until she was supposed to come. The whole day Reggie kept glancing over at Charlie while he was trying to eat, wondering if he was going to do it. Jake was still going around and acting all tough with his attention-seeking fake mark. Soon, the day turned dark, and Charlie's time began to dwindle down. We used our pocket knives to sharpen sticks, even if the leaders told us not to. We were going to use them to defend our tent, and if she wanted to take Charlie, she would have to take all three of us. So that night, everyone was settled down in their beds, but not us. We were prepared for her to unzip the tent and try to grab Charlie. The wind that night was howling, and the trees were being shaken like a dog.
I just wanted to say it before I die. I love you guys,
Charlie said with tears in his eyes, knowing that he wasn't going to last much longer. Right back at you, and hey, everything is going to turn out fine. That guy might be crazy for all we know, I replied, trying to keep Charlie's spirits up and also to take my mind off of what soon was going to happen. Guys, look, Jim replied with a quivering voice as he was looking through a crack in the tent zipper. We could all hear someone weeping outside of the tent, and it mixed with the wind, which turned it into a howl. What do you see? I responded hesitantly, not really wanting to know, but needing to know what it was. It's a blackish figure wearing a brown sack-looking type clothes. I think it's her. Her skin is so pale and she's sopping wet, Jim described as he began to shake in fear. Charlie was on the verge of crying, but I put my hand over his mouth and calmed him down. Is she coming in our direction? Charlie asked in a shaky, trembling voice. Sort of. She's heading to someone else's tent. She's looking inside of it. Now she's going to the next one and doing the same thing. She's looking for whoever has the mark. Hey, Nick, come and take over watching her. I can't stare at that hideous, distorted thing anymore. I guess I can do that, but stay close to Charlie, I responded, but as soon as I did, we heard screaming coming from one of the other tents. Someone must have seen her, I said as I quickly looked through the crack to see what was happening, and as soon as I did, I saw Jake on the ground outside of his tent.
Hey, didn't Jake have that fake mark that he put on himself?
Charlie asked with a hint of eagerness. Yeah, he did have that on his arm, I replied, wondering if she mistook Jake's mark for Charlie's. We then all heard him scream out for help, and I looked closer, and I couldn't see the girl, but Jake was there, and he was scared as a cornered animal. The girl let out a wretched, high-pitched scream that made all of our blood run cold. Everyone in the entire camp could probably hear it, and I looked away out of fear. I quickly looked back, and Jake was gone. All that was left was her mourning cries that grew fainter and fainter until they were lost in the wind. The wind settled down to where nothing could be heard outside of the camp. It was just a dead silence. No matter how hard they searched, they never found Jake's body, and his dad quit being the scoutmaster after that. Also, the summer camp had to be shut down for a while after the incident, but has since reopened. Charlie, Jim, and I are still great friends, and to this day we can't believe what went down that night. We never told a soul what we saw because we were afraid of people calling us crazy. Since then, I have always wondered what other urban legends are real, just like this one. But I guess you can only know if you've experienced them firsthand. All I can say is don't test their limits, or you might find yourself being dragged out of your tent in the middle of
wraps up today's interesting show. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you guys wish to check Silver Threads out, I will leave his info in the description below. But that's all for now. Thank you for tuning in, and do make it next Sunday. My name is Arbuckle.
My name's Silver Threads.
Signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ghosts and ghouls. My name is Arbuckle, and welcome back to the spookiest radio show around, bringing you the creepiest tales to keep you up at night. Now, this is a double feature today. So we had Silver Threads last episode, and we have a new special guest joining us for tonight's show. So without further ado, let's welcome my friend, M.Frightmare.
Hello, Fetch. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here this evening.
It's an honor having you here, friend. Now, before we get into the show, do tell us about yourself and what you do.
I post narration videos, do live readings, as well as I do interviews. I recently had a psychic medium on my channel and plan to do more with that in the future. The gaming aspect of what I do is fairly new to me. I recently started a second channel for gaming streams and videos. I'll be trying out new games as well as some oldies but goodies. Otherwise, you can find me lurking around on Twitter or working on creative content such as horror stories written by yours truly, or drawings for upcoming merch.
That's inspiring. Now, my neighbor's cat has been a bit more out and about lately, so, if you hear that in the background or anything, just let it run its course, and hopefully that cat and his owner will go away.
Or else what?
Or else... Or else I'll force Fetch to babysit you when I'm away and force you to listen to his rambling.
No, that's quite little nerd. Anything but that.
No.
Forgive me.
Too late.
Yikes. I'm sorry about all the ruckus.
No worries. So, on my way here, did you ever notice how odd your neighbors are?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Seriously, though.
Now, folks, it's time to dive into tonight's stories. So turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's sink into the tales that await you. Take it away, Miss Frightmare.
This personal story of mine is one that has caused me to question my love for the outdoors. For what I saw out there still haunts me to this day, and sometimes on nights that are dark and still, I can sometimes see the thing, with its twisted grin and cackling chuckle. I feel like the only way to escape its memory is to share it, so I'm not the only one that is burdened with this. To start off, I loved the outdoors all through my childhood with a strong passion. That's why when I had the chance to visit the Rocky Mountains in northern New Mexico with one of my friends, during the summer of our sophomore year in college, I jumped at the opportunity. For some more background info, my friend, who I'll call Jack, had some pretty wealthy parents, so he spent every summer traveling the world going on backpacking trips, which he, like me, loved to do. He went on backpacking trails that I could only dream to hike. He knew that I loved to backpack also, so he offered to pay for me to come along with him, knowing that there was no way I'd be able to pay for it myself. This was a dream come true for me because I grew up on the east coast of the United States and never went further west than the Mississippi River, and I always wanted to backpack the Rockies. So the school year ends, and I had been preparing to go on the trip, but a week away from the start of it, my friend calls me with some bad news, saying that his girlfriend had gotten in a minor car accident and that he is going to have to miss the trip. He did, however, say that I could go by myself if I still wanted to. My natural instincts told me that it's stupid to go into the woods alone, especially with unfamiliar territory. However, this opportunity was too big to pass up, so I told him that I would. So I went without him, and I started off on the trailhead alone. In the days prior to my arrival, it had been continually raining in the upper mountains. So I, being prepared for the weather, fastened on my rain gear and headed off along the stream-stricken trail. A few days later, I found myself lonely and wishing that Jack was there with me. The trip was supposed to last 2 full weeks, and it's only been 5 days, but I wanted to go home even if it was a dream trip. I only saw 3 other people along the trail, and they were going in the opposite direction of me. Now, I was thinking about calling it quits at the next stop in a small town that was 40 miles down the trail, because sure, I was seeing beautiful sights, but what was the point if I had no one to share them with? I wanted to get the 40 miles over with, so I continued to walk as the sun went down and hid behind the brisk mountain tops. It only took a few minutes for the darkness to creep up upon me at the end of the day, but being determined to get home, continued on my journey with a headlamp. I didn't stop to eat dinner, so I just snacked on beef jerky while I backpacked along. I figured I had made a stupid mistake with trying to get a little further during the night, because now I was submerged in darkness. So I stopped where I was and walked only 5 feet from the trail to set up my tent. I was supposed to camp a minimum of 50 feet off the main trail, but it was so dark, I decided to break that rule just for tonight. So I set up my tent and laid down on my bed mat while hiding my face in the sleeping bag. I then slowly drifted off to sleep, listening to the sounds of nature that surrounded me. Later on, the night turned to a cold, crisp breeze. I heard a rustling coming from the outside of the tent, and at the time I thought it was nothing. Then, I felt the tent shake a little, and a heavy breathing with snorts could be heard. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and shivers ran up and down my legs. I tried to be as still as I possibly could, as to not draw any attention to myself. Then I heard nothing like the world stopped turning. And out of nowhere, the tent was slit with a big striped gash. I tried to get out of my sleeping bag, but whatever it was now on top of me. I felt my bones on the brink of breaking due to the large weight. It felt like a large paw on top of my back. The claws from it were slightly drawing blood from where they were resting. I stayed as still as a rock, unmoving because my life depended on it. Whatever it was on top of me finally got off, but never completely left the area. I finally gathered enough courage that I peeked my head through the top of the sleeping bag and looked at the destroyed remnants of my tent. I then heard the footsteps and looked and beheld a gigantic grizzly bear that had its face in my bag looking for food. I then remembered that I had forgot to tie my bag in the tree to keep the bears and other animals from reaching it. I was just too tired that I forgot, and now that simple mistake may be the cause of my death. I knew not to move a muscle, or to look at the bear in the eyes, so I just stayed in my sleeping bag and demolished tent for the rest of the night, undetected by the bear. The sun finally dawned over the mountains. I had stayed up all night, terrified to the point I was unmovable due to shock. I finally shook out of my trance and saw the bear had moved on. My heart soared, and I felt like a great burden was lifted off my back. Then I remembered about my backpack, and my heart sunk. I got up, and I examined the damage done closely. My bag was torn, and the supplies were scattered. I saw all of my snacks and food were gone, and only crumbs with ripped wrappers were left. I did, however, rejoice when I saw that my water purifier was unbroken, so at least I could have clean water. I thought to myself that I may have survived the bear encounter, but without food or most of my supplies, I would be lucky if I would be able to make it 3 more days. I was now in the middle of the woods with no tent, no food, and really no hope. The backpacking trail was so long and rocky that most backpackers avoided it, so getting help from other backpackers along the trail was very slim. Plus, even if I did run into the other backpackers, they probably could not spare me much because in backpacking you carry the bare minimum, so I knew I was in trouble. Then I quickly got back onto the trail, where I looked around all around me for campfire smoke or backpackers, but there was none to be seen. I gave up and just continued along the trail with my head hung low, but then there were footsteps coming from up the trail and my hopes soared. I ran to where the sounds were coming from, but to my amazement, there was no one there. So I turned around and I began to walk, but then I noticed a slim, pale man standing on the trail only 10 yards away. I was surprised on how he had snuck up on me, but I didn't care because now I had hope. So I talked excitedly while walking towards him, saying, I was attacked by a bear and lost all of my food and some supplies, and I was wondering if I could... I stopped mid-sentence. My insides seemed to twist with a sickening feeling, and I felt that something was off about him. The man just stood there looking at me for a moment, and then answered in a low-toned, scratchy voice. My cabin is just down this hill, next to the river. If you follow me, I can show you, the man said while he gestured down the hill. I had mixed feelings about following the man, but I had no other choice, so I overruled my better judgment and followed. As we went down, the sky dimmed to darkness as if it was night. We went far off the trail, and I felt my legs fall numb, as if where I was going was ripping at my soul. I didn't have time to think, as we were already at the bottom of the hill. The man stopped walking, and his face snapped 180 degrees, which put him face to face with me, and he stated poetically in a mangled voice, The sky is night, though it is supposed to be bright, and the fear I can feel draws me near. You can't run nor hide, so I give up your pride, and I shall blow away your strife by taking your life. As soon as I heard this, I knew I had made a mistake by following him, and I broke out in a straight sprint for the hill. But as I tried to climb it, the rock and dirt turned to brittle sand. The hill became steeper, and I could not climb it without sliding back down because the fine sand provided no grip. I heard the man say again from the poem, and the fear I can feel draws me near. He had a smile on his face, but what was like none other I had ever seen before. It was of pure, tantalizingly evil. Then I darted towards the river, but then suddenly it overflowed with muddy water, making it impossible to cross without drowning. I kept hearing the twisted poem replay in my mind. I backed away from the river, and I felt my shoulders bump something, which caused me to turn around swiftly, and I turned around to see the man standing right behind me. I then asked with my body trembling, Who are you? What's going on? The man then smiled as he disappeared in a pile of dust that scattered in the cold, uneven wind. I looked around, wondering where the man had left to, and I knew I couldn't escape because whatever I was trying to do was blocked off, so I gave up and curled onto a ball. I could hear the man's cackling screech-like chuckle, and it echoed in my ears like the sound of a gunshot. It was like that he was everywhere, and nowhere all at once. I then stood up on my feet and was struck to the ground with a hard blow to the chest. I tried to get up again, but the same thing happened to me with much more force, knocking the wind out of my chest, and soon I could feel the burning sensation all over my body. I tried to scream out, but no matter how hard I tried, nothing came out, as if the thing had stolen the air from my lungs. I felt my ribs being squeezed, and the air was being forced out of my body. A ring of fire formed around me, and then the man appeared again. His eyes were red now, and his neck had markings around it that only could be performed by the fibers of a rope. Then the man pulled out a rope and fastened a knot into it right before he tossed it onto the ground. Then he snapped his fingers, and the rope immediately strung up on a tree that towered over me. All of this can end. All it takes is one little ride, the man said while gesturing at the rope that dangled above. My face scrunched as I yelled, I will not kill myself because of you. Oh, in that case, these next days will be quite an experience, the devilish man answered back. I thought back onto the poem the man had sung and recalled the words. And the fear I can feel draws me near. I thought of this, and then I thought if I did not show any fear, the man would lose his power over me somehow. I began to stand in the same way a bear would stand to protect his cubs. I cleared my thoughts, and I stopped sweating. The man saw this and said while cackling, You thought back onto the poem, I see. The man's tone intensified as he continued. You are a smart one, so it'll be fun to break you. You will fall like all the others before you. The man lifted his hands, which were now turning a reddish color to the darkened sky, where now there were trees full of hanging bodies. They swayed in the wind and were close to each other that would continually bump one another. I did not flinch a muscle, for I was going to live through this to see my family and friends again. The man began to talk with a smirk on his face. You're not scared of this? All of these hanging bodies are the ones who came before you. They are all mine now, and don't you think it's quite an impressive collection? The devilish man looked up at the bodies and continued. I did not kill a single one of them, but simply pushed them to the breaking point, the same way I'm going to push you. I broke the man's endless taunting. I will not let you get into my head and cause me to spill my own blood. The sky lightened a little bit and the man's powers began to dwindle down. You're fighting the fear which I impose upon you. You might be strong, but not strong enough for this. The man screeched with a raspy voice as he seemed to glide through the air towards me, and the wind quickened. The man had his hands outstretched and his skin began to peel off, revealing a black monster of indescribable hideousness. The flakes of his outer skin were picked up by the wind and turned into flames. Do you fear me now? The monster screamed, stopping only inches away from my face. I held back the feelings of fear that I so desperately wanted to come prying out. I'm not scared of you anymore, I stated firmly, while staring directly into the creature's dead eyes. The beast grew into a rage, but then calmed down to where it bowed its head and backed away from me, turning into black ashes, leaving only the sound of his cackle, which caused me to shake. Immediately as this happened, I fell to the dirt and passed out. I awoke in my tent with sweat covering my entire body. I looked around me and had all of my food and gear and a nasty headache. I then said to myself with a sigh of relief, it was all a dream. That thing I saw doesn't and could not actually exist. Then I packed up my stuff just thinking about my dream. I got all ready to go and began to walk onward on the backpacking trail. Soon I then started to pass the place in my dream where I had met the man. It was strange. I never had seen this part of the trail before, but it exactly matches the trail in my dream. I shrugged it off as a coincidence and continued to walk, but my eyes wandered down to the place where I had followed the man off the trail, and I saw something that chilled me straight to my very core. I saw in the distance the exact same man from my dreams. I shrugged it off as a coincidence and continued to walk, but my eyes wandered down to the place where I followed the man off the trail, and I saw something that chilled me straight to my very core. I saw in the distance the exact same man from my dreams, dead, hanging from a tree.
Well, that wraps up today's interesting show. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. Also, special thanks to M.Frightmare for joining me this evening. If you guys want to give her channel a visit, please do. She has a variety of content that will spark some wonder. I'll link her info in the description below. But that's all for now. Thank you for tuning in and tune back in next Sunday. My name is Arbuckle, signing off.